Hey there, David Chesworth, coming to you from the Sweetgrass Inn at Hilton Head Health for another episode of Health Talk. I'm excited to introduce you to our guest today, registered dietitian Lindsay Ford. And in fact, when I was an intern at Hilton Head Health back in 2012, Lindsay Ford was a dietitian and fitness coach for Hilton Head Health.
And that was.
Yes. So that's how we first met. And so, as I mentioned, Lindsay's a registered dietitian. She has experience, obviously, working at health retreats like Hilton Head Health and others, working in health club settings and eating disorder clinics. And today, she's here to talk about the dietitian's perspective on emotional eating. And I can't think of a better dietitian to talk to about this.
Well, thank you, David. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Lindsay.
Yeah.
And thanks for helping out this week at the resort. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's my pleasure. Yeah, it's I'm not Anne.
Yeah.
He is awesome.
Yeah.
But it's been really fun.
Yeah, no, so our director of behavioral health, Anne, is out of town currently, and so we have a few people plug in and play in, and Lindsay's been covering some emotional eating topics in the program. And so my first question for you, Lindsay, is what role can a dietitian play in overcoming emotional eating?
Yeah, so I would say, when we think about emotional eating, there's like that whole concept of it's about the food, it's not about the food, but it's about the food, and
Right.
So
it's like a vicious cycle.
It's this vicious cycle. And so where I come in is, there's going to be some overlap. Like, it's going to be helpful for me to understand, hey, every night I am tapped out. I'm just overwhelmed, and I finally get to unwind. And that's when some of those emotional eating episodes can really start to take place. And so my role is I want to hear that. I want to better understand that. But it's also looking at from a nutritionist perspective and from a food perspective, how can we get ahead of it a little bit? Is there anything we can do to prevent some of it? Can we plan our day differently? And also, when it comes to these, I would say, episodes or whether it's compulsive eating, binge-like eating, whatever that looks like, is how can we work ourselves out of that? How can I go into it slowing down? So it's going to come probably from different angles, whether it's what can we do earlier in the day? How can we go into those states? Can we shift out of that pretty quickly? Maybe there are certain foods that we need to address head on. Let's just use Oreos as an example. That's a cool one, right? Like no one's going to feel great about eating like an entire pack of Oreos, right, especially afterwards. But when somebody's in it, like they're in it. Mm-hmm. And it can be very quick to just say, well, we're just going to cut out the Oreos. We're never going to eat them again.
All or nothing.
That all or nothing. And so how can we, that's a huge piece of it, is how can we break out of the all or nothing, where it's not so much of I'm never going to have it again. And if I have it again, it's a matter of, well, when I have Oreos again, what could that look like? And how could I work that in versus just tapping out and saying,
how do you make it part of the plan?
Structured
way?
Yeah. Yeah. And there can be structure to it, but I'd say sometimes it's like we know our lives, like things come up and it's like, well, that happened. And so it's figuring out how to work through those times too.
When things fall out of structure, how do you manage?
Yeah.
Okay, that's So what are some like common strategies that have worked with clients where they fall out of structure, and how do they navigate that? Where do they start?
Yeah, I would say one starting point is, and I will say this pretty, having breakfast the next day is one of the best things somebody can do.
Okay.
And I would say when we think about eating episodes where they, eat emotional eating, quote, quote. But let's say they've gone to town, into the pantry and into the freezer, and then they go to bed and they wake up the next morning, they're probably not going to be as prone to say, okay, let's have a nice breakfast in the morning. But that's actually a really good place to start, is like almost like resetting the day because what's already happened has already happened. We don't want to beat ourselves up over it again, but starting the next day with a solid breakfast is at least one strategy.
Interesting. And probably counterintuitive to somebody who's experiencing emotional eating.
Yes, because I'd say physically they might not feel like having anything the next, like there might not be any hunger. There might be some tiredness. Even the motivation to make something might not necessarily be there. but it can be a really great like reset is like, okay, let's just have, whether it's their typical breakfast that they're used to having, I'm just getting something in.
So if you can get someone to view breakfast not as like the next calorie station, but as a reset button
Yeah.
to start off
Yeah.
the new day.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Is that easier said than done? Or like, do you, in your experience, how has that strategy played out?
I would say it can help break the cycle because when we think about compulsive eating, binge-like eating, where it feels pretty much out of control, oftentimes that cycle's on repeat and it could be for days. So we're not eating enough during the day, we're busy, we're working, we're caretaking, we're doing all these things, and then boom, pre-dinner, dinner, post-dinner, like all of it, right?
Dinner number
all, yeah.
Yeah.
It's all in a, oftentimes 4 p.m. on, and then that cycle goes on repeat. So to be able to kind of reset and say, you know what, tomorrow I'm going to make myself breakfast, I think it can be a mindset thing. But then even from a nutrition perspective, it's like, okay, we're at least getting something in our bodies early. And then hopefully we can think about lunch. Because I'd say from an eating schedule structure perspective, that's one of the best things somebody can do. Because when somebody's struggling with emotional eating, there's a chaos that I think is connected with it, is just this, oh gosh, it's like it's all over the place. But if we can follow some sort of routine with our eating, even regardless of what we're eating, because we can easily pick that apart. But it's like, hey, if I just had breakfast, if I just had lunch, like let's not pick apart the fact that it's a sandwich. Like, because we could have the freak out over, well, it's bread and how much condiment and what about this? What about deli meat? Do I have just have the sandwich?
Yeah.
I know that sounds silly, but it's
the pattern of having
just the pattern.
Yeah.
Yeah. Routine is really valuable.
And I think I've heard like with a lot of the clients that you work with, you also have like a therapist that you kind of share clients with.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like a tag team.
Yes. Yeah. So I'd say for folks that really, they struggle with this hard, and it's been like their default, because everyone's probably got different defaults. For some it's smoking, for some it's other outlets, and for a lot of people it's food. Regardless of what it is, I would say having a therapist to collaborate with is so valuable, where you can tackle both things at the same time. I'd say historically there was, I think, some thought around, well, you've got to do the therapy component first and then you can work that dietitian in, where I think what we know now is like having both working together, which is so great about coming to a wellness retreat, is you can work on so many things at the same time. And then it's like, oh, like it's all intertwined.
Right.
And so that's where it's really, I love working with other therapists.
Because then you can really come at it from multiple angles.
Yeah.
So in your experience, what are some of the more common emotional triggers that lead to overeating or emotional eating?
Yeah, I would say a common one that I hear is actually boredom.
Oh, really? Boredom.
That's like a
that makes sense.
I'm just bored. If you actually look at like the feelings wheel, boredom actually falls within the I think the loneliness and sad.
So what's the name of that wheel you said?
The feelings wheel.
The feeling. Can you?
Anne uses it.
Anne uses it. Okay, for those who haven't been to Anne's class, can you explain the feelings wheel?
The feelings wheel is basically a wheel of feelings.
Okay. It's like a wheel. It's feelings in it.
Right. All these different words.
I love it.
And what I love is it doesn't put it into good and bad.
Yeah.
It puts it into just, these are just feelings. And it doesn't say that these are just feelings.
But sweet saying, yeah.
And at this core, you have like these major feelings, and then it kind of offshoots into more descriptive words, I would say.
Okay.
And so what I love about it is, can I even register what I'm feeling? So that's where, working with a therapist can come into play, but I hear boredom a lot. I would say loneliness.
Makes sense.
I would say overwhelmed, kind of feeling like just tapped out, tired. And those are some common ones. But yeah, anxious, overwhelmed, tired, lonely, embarrassed, which I think can be hard to discern, but that's a pretty strong one. Yeah, those are some big ones. But I think if somebody can register, this is how I'm feeling and this is how it shows up specifically with my eating, And then we could take it to the other side of, or not eating, which can be detrimental
Also,
too.
and eating this, yeah.
Yeah, that can turn into an eating disorder is recognizing these patterns. And so it's just really helpful for the person to be able to recognize that for themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It makes sense. And so in the therapy side, they're probably diving in on what's triggering that. How can we cope in non-food ways? And
Yes.
And then on the dietitian side, you're helping come up with food-related strategies to better manage it.
Yeah.
And one of those strategies is anchor yourself to a breakfast, no matter how horrible the night before was, or it's something that anchors you.
I love that word.
Okay.
Yes. It's anchoring is a great word to describe that. So yes, love that. Anchor your day.
The day. But then you also mentioned lunch, and it's interesting that you say for those meals,
oh yeah,
don't worry about necessarily what it is, just have the habit. So is a lot of the working with a dietitian with emotional eating just establishing a new habit, would you say?
Routine.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'd say a lot of people I work with, lunch is actually just a hot mess. And what I mean by that is some days it happens, some days it doesn't. And if we think about, the middle of our day, we're busy, we're occupied. It could be the most stressful parts of our day. And so being able to take a break and get something nourishing, but also something that makes us happy. Like food, genuinely, there's satisfaction that comes with it.
Mm-hmm.
So then I've got some theory and thoughts around, well, if we've gone all day without any food pleasure, guess what we want later in the day?
A lot of food pleasure.
A lot of food pleasure. So it's it's no wonder that we are attached to refined carbohydrates, ultra-processed foods, the hyper-palatables specifically where it's got sugar, fat, salt. It's no wonder that we gravitate towards those, especially if we haven't given ourselves things that we enjoy from food earlier on.
So with breakfast and lunch, what would you say constitutes as a meal? Would a snack work, or because maybe some people when they think, oh, I gotta make a breakfast, what does that entail? And
yeah, if somebody's used to not having anything, I'm like, just have something, have a bar, have yogurt with some berries, something, smoothie, even if it's a pre-made protein, something or other, just have something. I would say ideally, if somebody can just take 5 to 10 minutes, avocado toast with some eggs, that's a little bit more in the savory. It could be a yogurt parfait, yogurt, berries, granola. It could be something that they've made ahead of time and then they reheat it, so it could be something like a quiche where it's on the weekend I'm going to make that. And then that way I can just have it there for me and I don't have to really, I'm just assembling and reheating at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So protein, getting something with some fiber, so maybe some sort of plant food.
Okay.
Carbohydrates in the morning can be valuable too. Just a balanced. Yeah.
Well nourishing.
Yeah. Because I think we can hyper-analyze that too. Because I know, intermittent fasting. Anybody that struggles with binge eating specifically, intermittent fasting is a hard no.
Not the tool for you.
Not the tool.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a black or white, just don't eat. But hard no.
Yeah.
Then we've got the keto and the low carb and then this or that. It's a balanced meal. Let's not pick it apart.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Yeah. I mean, for some who can do intermittent fasting and then not binge and still have well-balanced meals, it can be a good tool.
Yeah.
But if you already struggle with binge eating, it kind of promotes more binge eating, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Restricting actually tends to be a huge culprit for
binging.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense.
And I think part of it is take the emotional piece out of it. We are humans.
Mm-hmm.
When we aren't getting enough food during the day, when we require the most energy output, and our brain needs energy, everything needs energy to fuel off of, it would only make sense that we would get to 3, 4 o'clock and now we're craving and aching for it.
Right.
That's just us being a human.
Right. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So you kind of alluded earlier to food can be very satisfying. It can give pleasure and happiness.
Yeah.
So when you're working with someone with emotional eating and addressing this breakfast strategy, how much of that is part of the conversation? Like, let's find something that brings you pleasure that is maybe not, it doesn't have to be the best thing in the world, but maybe it's not the worst thing in the world and it satisfies you. Like, how much of the conversation revolves around that?
Okay. I think this is actually an important piece because we could talk about this concept of hunger and fullness, right? So we want to eat till we're full.
Yeah.
I would also build a case that we also need to eat to be satisfied. So like, I'll just use this as
fill
an
up the
example.
stomach, fill up the soul.
Yes. Yes. So like I could have a bowl of chili for lunch and get full off that. And recognize that there is nothing wrong with that either. But I like to use a scale of 1 to 10. So we could take hunger fullness scale. 1 being I'm starved, 10 being like I'm extremely full, overly full.
Thanksgiving, the goal of Thanksgiving.
Yes. Pain, discomfort. 5 is, I don't really know. Like I'm just somewhere in the middle.
Neutral.
Then we've got same thing with like satiety is on a 1, it's like that was cardboard. Like that was no. I don't want to eat that ever again. There's got to be a different way to change that up. Not satisfied at all. 10 being like best thing ever.
Like the enjoyment factor.
The enjoyment
so there's like
factor.
the stomach feeling and then the enjoyment feeling.
Yes.
Okay.
And I think it's never going to fall like this every single time. But if somebody can be from at least an enjoyment perspective, a 7 and up, because if we're consistently at a 5, that's boring.
Yeah.
Well, if I'm bored, what am I going to do in between meals?
Interesting.
I'm probably going to find something.
It just blew my mind. You can be bored from the food you're eating and therefore want to eat more food.
Yes.
I never thought of it that way.
So like think about the person that has the same thing every day for lunch.
Yeah.
And they get full off that. They like the meal.
Yeah.
But then over time, it's like, well, it used to be like an 8 and now it's like a 4.
Now I need more.
Like they either want more or afterwards they're aching for something else. And then all of a sudden they find themselves in an eating pattern. They're like, oh, well, I don't know. Like there's something that's not feeling right about this. This isn't the path I want to go on. So like, go back to the chili.
Yeah.
I could do that one day and be fine. But the next day it's like, you know what? Let's put some cheese on top. Let's put some onion and avocado. Let's take some tortilla chips and crumble them up, put it on top, and boom. Like that might be a much more pleasurable experience. And it's still getting me to that full point, but now I've just made it a lot more exciting.
I have never heard it explained that way, where you take not just the fullness, but the enjoyment, and you try to align those.
Yes.
To be like, okay, you're somewhere around like a 7 or 8 fullness. You're not painfully full. You're not hungry anymore. And you're at least a 7 or higher with enjoyment.
Yeah.
Like if you can find that balance.
If you can find that. So I think it goes to like, what are your favorite restaurants? Where do you like to go?
Yeah.
What types of cuisine do you tend to gravitate towards? Yes, like we still want to eat nutritiously and we want nutrient-dense foods. It doesn't mean that the food has to be like wah wah.
Yeah.
So, it's getting creative, it's changing it up, it's going with the seasons, it's trying new recipes, it's, and that's a lot of work. So that could also mean getting some help with that.
Yeah.
But
like with a dietitian?
With a dietitian.
Or a culinary, like a healthy chef or something like that.
Yeah, get a new cookbook that you're excited about, check it out. But I see that a lot my day starts off really well. Like I'm rocking it. But then at night, so that's the other piece of it. You might have some folks where they don't eat enough during the day.
Mm-hmm.
And then
therefore
at night. But you also have folks that do eat breakfast. They do eat lunch.
They have the anchor.
How do I still struggle? It's like, well, let's look at what you're eating. If it's the same thing all the time, or if you're kind of bored, or if it's just too monotonous.
Or getting that enjoyment factor.
Yeah. Because if you're not, then, well, it's like movement, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're not enjoying it, like what are we going to do?
Right.
We're probably
not going to do it.
We're probably not going to do it.
Yeah.
And so, we stop moving, but with food, it's like, then it's going to turn into something else.
Yeah, man, you really got to address both of those. You got to make sure that you are eating throughout the day in a way that keeps you full.
Mm-hmm.
And also in a way that keeps you satisfied.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I think is interesting. Like coming to a place like Hilton Head Health, different wellness retreats. It's like, They're natural. People will talk, especially in like week 1. They're like, oh, this is awesome. I love it. Like, I'm feeling so satisfied.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, imagine eating what you're eating here day in, day out. You have the same thing. Like, at some point, you're going to get bored of it. So what starts off as like
a little bit of variety.
Yeah. Like, but people are so satisfied, especially at first, probably because they're in an environment where they're choosing other foods. Like, what they're having here for breakfast is different than what they're having at home. What they're having here for lunch is different than what they're having from home, which is part of the reason why people come here. And it's not just about what you're having here. It's the fact that you're changing up what you're typically doing, and that alone has value.
Would you say that sometimes it's enough to just change one meal out of your day, and that could be enough to like you have the same breakfast and lunch, but every month or two you change up your dinner,
change it up,
or like then maybe the next time you change up your lunch, or
you don't get
like overhaul your whole meal plan week.
No, but it could just be. I've been doing the same 2 or 3 lunches, and let's keep this one, but let's change up 2 of them, and just because we don't want to have to think too hard about it, but we also want to make sure that we're setting ourselves up so that if we want to prevent some of these episodes and these situations where we do feel more out of control of food, is how can we get ahead of it? Because to say like it's never going to happen again,
that's naive.
Yeah.
How often, everyone's different, but like as a general recommendation, how often would you suggest tweaking your meal plan to keep things fresh?
Yeah, I would say like having 2 or 3 breakfast options over the course of a week, having maybe 3 or 4 lunches, and then dinners could be more of that revolving door. Like, that might change more often. Like, I would say dinner is one to change probably the most. Like, if you finish your day, that last meal of the day, if that's always the same thing, and we know nothing good happens until the late hours of the evening, like, we want to finish that last meal like, yes.
Finish strong, yeah. It was amazing.
That was amazing. Because we can start getting our heads a lot, into but I would say, every 2 to 3 weeks, just taking a step back, like, okay, do I need to change it up? This has been working well, but like, let's reevaluate.
This is a really fun conversation because it's stuff that I know a little bit about, but like hearing you talk about it is just getting me to think in different ways. So like, I'm curious what role mindful eating plays. Like, say like they have a meal that makes them full but not satisfied, and I'm wondering, like, can they have like something that would be deemed as bad and mindfully eat it to fill up that soul? Is that like a strategy? I'm just
So actually, some of the work I'll do with folks is like, let's say it's a cookie or chips or chocolate. It's like they might actually it might be a wiser play to actually put it into a meal that they're already having. And
I'm sorry, is it like a certain ingredient or?
So like, let's say it's a chocolate chip cookie.
Okay.
And typically they've been having
not Oreos anymore.
We're moving on. Moving on.
New cookie.
No, let's use chips. Let's use chips.
Okay, chips.
Okay, so let's say lately it's been 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and they open up the bag of chips. Not a single serve bag, but like,
the full thing.
The full thing. And they find that like before you know it, half the bag's gone.
Yeah.
It's like, well, let's try pooling a handful of chips with, let's say, a salad at lunch. I'm just using a salad just as an example. And you're actually very intentional up putting. We have now just changed the time of day that we're having the chips. The chips are not also in isolation, because I think there's that. It is more, chips are more hyper palatable. Like, they just are.
Yeah. You'll be very satisfied and not very full.
Yeah, 100%. And if they're in isolation,
you'll keep going.
And then depending on what state whatever's going on in that moment, even leading up to it, might not always be like, that's when we start to hit that dip in the day too. So it's like, okay, let's just take a handful, put it in a bowl, or put it, in even on a nap, just something, and you have it with your meal. There's a mindfulness component to that. Like, we're more aware. We're in a more aware state when we're doing that compared to the just mindless 3 or 4. So that would be one strategy. But I'd say mindful eating is really powerful because it slows us down. We actually taste our food, or we try to taste it. We pay more attention. Do I even like this? I've heard this time and time again from folks. It's like, I don't even really like it all that much. When I'm really tasting it, it just
tastes fake.
It's just not my favorite thing, but I keep going for it. I'd say another piece is like trying to get rid of distractions. So if we're on our phone, if we're looking at email.
I'm guilty of that.
I know. I am too.
Yeah.
I am too. Especially in the middle of the day.
Yeah.
Because again, that middle of the day, you're all over the place.
Well, and the phones make it so easy to just like put a video on while you're eating and
there can be
mindlessly eating.
I'd say some that can be helpful for some in the sense that
Okay.
And I'm not saying to distract ourselves in a way that's not helpful, but I will say this, like if it's the TV at 10 o'clock at night, that's going to be different than maybe watching some sort of like cool video TED Talk at noon. You know, there might be some things there, but I think we can be mindful even when there's distractions going on.
Can be very present.
It's when we know certain things we're really
Disengaged.
We're disengaged with the food completely.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Interesting. So in the chip example you laid out, you take a food that is normally not filling at all, but very enjoyable,
and you
pair it with something that is filling.
Yeah.
And
you just be curious about it. Like
just try it out.
Just try it out. Was that a completely different experience?
Mm-hmm.
I would bet that there's fear going into it for some of like, well, once I start, I'm not going to be able to stop. Okay. And if we go down that rabbit hole of I'm never going to have chips again, like how do we build confidence with it?
Mm-hmm.
Like the only way we can build confidence with those foods is to eat it. Like
you got to do it.
You got to do it. We got to. It's
Action,
like the book, Going on a Bear Hunt.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I can't go over it. Can't go under it. I got to go through it. And so let's stop avoiding it. Let's face it head on. We're not saying it's a free for all into the family size bag of chips, and we're on the sofa.
Yeah.
And then we throw away the bag so no one can see it, and all that kind of stuff. But it's how can I be more intentional about it?
Mm.
How can I plug it in? Not a matter of if I have it again, but when I have it again, this is what I want it to look like. And let's just be curious about the first couple times. It might feel, oh gosh, like I could keep going here. I want to go back for seconds. I want to go back for thirds. Mm-hmm. That's probably going to happen for some. But as time goes on, I feel like it's going to turn into more of the conversation of like, well, do I really want that?
Mm-hmm.
Is that what I'm feeling like right now? And then, but if we just avoid it, we're not going to build that confidence to be able to I think, make those decisions.
So would you say that in your opinion, the primary role of the dietitian with an emotional eater is to help them come up with an eating pattern that helps them to feel both full and satisfied? I think that's the compass.
That's a huge part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then when you're working with the therapist then addresses from the emotional side, how do we reduce these how do we deal with these triggers and, overcome these emotional traumas or whatever it might be?
Right.
Okay.
Right. Like how can we cope differently? Because I think there's times where we want to get to the root. There's going to be times where we can find other distractions.
Is that also is there kind of a great overlap area that you've experienced? Like sometimes you find yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm like, trauma's one word. Nope.
You're like, no.
Yeah. But I will say, like, if somebody's like, I'm just really stressed, and I open up the bottle of wine, it's like, okay, like, can we walk through the door and put on your gym shoes and go on a walk? Can we just can
you break up the cycle?
Can we break up the cycle? So like there's going
to be a little bit of health coaching involved.
Yeah. There's going to be times where it's like, it's going to be coping distraction things.
Yeah. God. Yeah. So you're not always talking about the foods, the recipes, the macros. Right. You're also talking about
there's going to be behaviors for sure. But yeah, we're not going to spend, I will listen, but if somebody needs to just
Yeah.
let some stuff out, like 100%. Like, I get it.
Yeah.
There's HIPAA. Like, it's gonna stay with me.
There's a thing called
Yeah. And it's okay. Is this something that maybe we want to talk about with your therapist? Have you already talked about it with your therapist?
Mm.
If they don't have a therapist, it might be something like, okay, we're coming back to the same thing. That could be something where I could help them find one, connect with one, and there's other support systems there too.
Yeah. Awesome. Very cool. Well, I have another question for you. So, like chocolate bars.
Yeah.
So to use, I'm sure you remember it from your time here, to use Bob's phrase, unwise, better, best.
Yeah. Yeah.
Would you say that there's merit to having a protein version of the chocolate bar versus the chocolate bar? And I'm asking genuinely, like when someone comes to you with that question, could that be a strategy moving in the right direction? Or is it just like, look, chocolate bar is a chocolate bar, like kind of thing?
So I definitely think like if we're looking at it purely from nutritional value,
yes,
then the unwise, better, best approach is beautiful.
Okay.
If we are approaching it from somebody loving, adoring Hershey's, and I'm trying to encourage them to go a completely different direction, like you're going to have a chocolate protein bar, I could get the giant middle finger, right? Like, screw you. Like,
that's not the Hershey bar.
So
depends the purpose that it's serving.
Yeah.
I see what you mean.
The other thing would be, and I've heard this too of like.
So you're saying nutritionally, yes, there's merit from that. A protein version of that bar would be better. However, there's also the emotional side.
Yeah.
And it might not be better.
It might not be better because if you try to replace something time and time again, somebody might have 5 protein bars
and not feel
and feel like that did not. If I just would have had exactly what I wanted in a state where I'm very aware of what I'm doing, I bet the wiser choice is actually to have exactly what they want versus always going for the best choice. And then before you know it, somebody has a million best choices.
And then they binge.
And then that's the thing, is that then it can turn into, not everybody, but it can turn into now it's like the weekend warrior, right? It's like now I find myself, going to the convenience store and I'm raiding the candy section. Like hummus and carrots is not going to fix a chocolate craving. Like that's not right.
Right. That would be also a pretty big leap.
That's a big leap. Big leap. Let's not make big leaps.
But I know what you. Picture you're painting.
Yeah, but I will say like, I think it's really awesome people caring about what they put in their bodies. Mm-hmm. It's when the caring starts to become obsession and we get too fixated on that and the emotional, psychological piece gets pushed aside.
Right.
Because we want to think about this long term.
Right.
Like what's going to work
serving you nutritionally and emotionally.
Yeah.
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 I like how you broke that down for me just there. Like from a nutritional perspective, unwise, better, but it would be. But how is that Hershey bar really serving you? Would it really better serve? Yeah.
Right. Because there could be times where like we know it doesn't serve that person at all.
Yeah.
And then there's going to be times where it's like, yeah, like this is exactly like what I'm going to have right now. And I'm going to own it.
Yeah.
And I'm going to, again, it kind of goes back to not if I have it, but when I have it, I want it to look like this. Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting. So for anyone who's struggling with emotional eating, like, are there like support groups or anything like that you recommend to them, or like first like outreach steps that they could take?
Yeah. I mean, you could always look into like therapeutic groups and maybe they have something available in your local community. There's different podcasts that kind of gear more towards this. So like you could even, I'd say, you could, it depends. Like some people want to go more like the psychology route. And for others, they might want to go more nutrition route. Nutrition route, I would say more of the intuitive eating, like even, in the search bar, like
look for intuitive eating.
Look for intuitive eating. That's a good, those are
Good search terms.
Good search terms. Emotional eating, another search term. Binge eating, search term. So those would be some starting points. Book, there's books that are out on the market. Anything that's like kind of addressing diet culture can be a good read. I like the book called Body Respect. I read that a while ago, and I thought it was just really interesting because today I was, covering the body neutrality, and like so often we're changing what we eat because we're unhappy and displeased with our body, and we know that changing what we eat can shift our appearance. It can shift our body, and so it's also looking at it from the angle of, okay, what can my body do for me? How can I have respect for my body? So that's a good read, is Body Respect. But yeah, I would look at it from podcasts, books. Is there anything in the local community? And it could just be starting with like maybe somebody needs just more one-on-one help with it too.
Maybe a dietitian.
Yeah.
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 Like permission to eat.
Permission to eat.
Yeah, which that's your thing, right?
Yeah.
A website? Yeah. You got a website? Permission to?
I do have a website, and I will be completely honest, I haven't looked at it in a while. Well, I don't know what. It doesn't look like the marketing team is probably like, But yeah, like my number's on there, my email's on there, so someone can find me. It's very easy to remember. Permissiontoeat.com. Not the number 2, but TO.
Gotcha. Permission TO.
Yeah.
Eat.
Yeah. It was a very expensive URL.
Yeah, it's a cool one.
It's very cool.
It's very self-explanatory too.
100%.
It was well done.
Can I have the chocolate bar? Yes, you can.
Yes, you can.
It's as simple as that.
Let's find a way to make it part of the plan.
And there's always an and.
Yeah, okay.
Let's.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
That's good. Well, I feel more enlightened on the topic, and I feel like definitely some people struggle more with emotional eating, and not everybody has an eating disorder, but I think that everybody can relate to emotional eating
100%
to some degree.
We all do it.
We've all been stressed and ate. We've all been happy and ate. We've all been sad and ate at some point or another. And I think I'm a huge fan of like tools that are kind of like compass, that like make it simple and point you in a direction. And the way you described using those two tools of 1 to 10 satisfied, 1 to 10 full, and aligning them is just such a very clear-cut strategy to me.
Yeah.
And I love that. Yeah. And I hope that the listeners and viewers got also took that, and you had a lot of good insights. And so for anyone who's struggling with emotional eating back home, do you have any final words of wisdom that you'd like to give them today?
I would say they're not alone. There's a lot of people that struggle with this, but when somebody is in these episodes, it's usually in isolation. And so, not saying that it makes it any...
They feel alone.
I would say it doesn't necessarily make it any easier, but recognizing like, hey, there's ways to get help for this, and I'm not the only one that struggles with it. Yeah. I would say another piece of it is somebody that's in those cycles, and they've been down these roads, diet cycles, and then where it's just been all over the place, weight cycles, diet cycles, all of these things, is like there is hope that people can recover through it.
Yeah.
It can be a longer journey than what somebody would hope for.
Yeah. As the tough journeys usually are.
Yeah. Well, I like this. It's like there could be unrealistic goals. I think you and I both know, like, there could be, but thinking about it more so, there just could be unrealistic time frames. And so it's okay. Like, maybe in the past, I've tried to do things too quickly. What's like the long-term approach?
Like, be a little bit more, trust the process.
Yeah.
Just show up.
Yeah.
Be consistent.
Yeah.
It might not happen tomorrow, but
yeah.
That's where that old saying, Rome wasn't built in a day.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely.
Love it. So you're not alone as the final message, and be patient.
Yeah.
Not alone, be patient. Very cool.
Patience. Be patient.
I love that. Well, Lindsay, thank you so much for joining today. Thanks for helping out this week. Yeah. So awesome working with you again, and having you as a guest on the podcast. We'll have to have you back sometime.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much, Lindsay.
Yep.
And thank you to listeners and viewers back home for watching. I hope you got value from this episode. As always, our mission is to serve you with value. So be sure to comment Let us know, who else would you like us to interview? What other questions would you like us to answer for you? As always, this is for you. So thanks for showing up. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.